Good morning, Thursday, May 14th. How are you? It's nice to see you all. Having kind of a hard time today, so I will try to keep it all together. But I have had two parents email me in the last, it hasn't even been 24 hours, that their kiddos have just come to the realization that they won't have Mrs. Cerny and I in the fall. And that makes me so sad. And during our class Zoom meeting yesterday, Mrs. Cerny got teary. Well, then that triggers me to get teary. Mr. Matisse is teary. So it is such a loss for us all. We missed out truly on having your kiddos these last couple months. It is such a cool time, the end of kindergarten. We do all these fun things. You know, last year we had like a pet kind of program. This year is Potato Olympics. We always have a field day. We have a butterfly thing that we do. It's such an exciting time, and we've lost that, and you've lost that, and we're moms, and we miss the touch of the kiddos. My kids are big. I have to bribe them for hugs. You know, it's so hard. So kiddos out there, we will still be in the building. Who knows what the fall is going to look like, but we are here for you. You are going to be so taken care of by your first grade teachers. Do not worry, they will be awesome. We are here if you need us. Please, when you walk back and forth in the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, please wave. When you're passing us at recess, please give us a wave. But do not worry, you are way closer to Mrs. Januzzi. You have your own bathrooms. It's very exciting to move into a different hallway. So I'm very excited for you. It just makes me really sad. So, all right, transitioning just a little bit. So today I have decided it's Octopus Day.
We just keep forming days.
I know. So we're gonna end up with 48 videos when all is said and done.
We won't round up to 50 because why do that?
I was gonna round up to 50, but it seemed hard, and I'm gonna torture you all with a Jackson graduation video next Friday, so stay tuned for that. But that seemed like a good one to kind of end it. So next Friday will be our last one, and then we'll all break for summer. Who knows what the fall will bring, but I have so enjoyed doing these videos. It has been a great connection. I appreciate all the feedback. Even depending on the day, some days my kids are crabbier than others, they're more into it than others, but it really has been a team effort. So that being said, one of our kindergartners, Carla, had her mom email me and say that every time she looks at her glass octopus, she thinks of me.
Aww.
So Carla, thank you for the video idea, kiddo. I needed it. So Mr. Zsigray at Christmas surprised me with a trip to Florida to see our dear friends. I used to babysit their kids years ago. They're like my own kids. So, and then Mr. Zsigray said, I'm coming too. And I thought, wait a minute. Is this a Christmas gift or not? Which I'm joking. So while I was there and we were touring St. Augustine with our friends, and we went into a gift shop and they had these little glass octopuses. Well, so then I said, I need 24. You know what? They scoured high and low between the four of us, the two women that worked there. They're in the basement. They're looking everywhere, and we finally scraped together 24 of these octopuses, octopi,
I think.
Octopi, and mine is a little bit bigger. And they lovingly wrapped them up. I carried them on to bring them all home, and then I sent them home to KB. So all of you in KB have an octopus, and they're all different colors. There were red ones, green ones, blue ones, yellow ones, I think, brown ones. They're awesome. So thank you. I have one also, and every time I look at it, I think of all of you. So due to that, today is Octopus Day. So we have a couple of octopus things around the house. Who would have thought that we're heavy on the octopus? A few years ago, we took a New England road trip as a family. It was like 9 days in a car.
We're not a road trip type of family, but this was pretty awesome.
It was pretty awesome. I know it was 5 hotels. I don't know if it was 5 or 6 states, but it was incredible. I highly recommend it. It did bring us closer as a family because you're really trapped in that car. Jackson and I watched How I Met Your Mother on the DVD screen in the back seat. I mean, it was a ball.
Where did we go? We went to like Rhode Island. We went to Newport, Rhode Island.
Massachusetts.
Boston.
New York.
Yeah.
New Hampshire.
I mean,
Spacing.
Newport and Boston were by far our favorites.
Right. They were incredible. So in Newport, I think Mr. Zsigray and Dylan were at the Tennis Hall of Fame. That was Mr. Zsigray's only request. Could we please see the Tennis Hall of Fame? So while he and Dylan went there, Jackson and I went and did fun souvenir shopping. So I think this was from one of the mansions that you can tour in Newport, which is fun. This goes on our Christmas tree. Every time we travel as a family, we get a family Christmas ornament to remember that trip. And then I think Jackson and I bought this in the Newport in some cheesy tourist gift shop. We have a stingray, we have a crab or a lobster or something. And Jackson has all these downstairs on his fridge. So, keeping with the octopus theme, I will attach today an octopus dot to dot. It's tricky. It goes up pretty high, but you can do it. So I'll attach that. If you want to do it, print it out. I also made a couple octopus crafts. They're easy. This one, I used a muffin liner that you would maybe put cupcakes or something in. You could also use a coffee filter. That would be a really big octopus. Then you need to cut 8 legs, glue them together, give him a face. He's off and running. Now I did the accordion fold, which was tricky for some of you. I'm going to do a very quick recap. Remember, you go forward and then backward, and then forward, backward. Forward, backward, okay? And when you're done, it looks like this. Many of you struggled with that. It's okay. You can roll them, and it would be just as amazing if you rolled it. Or truthfully, he could just have straight legs. Who cares?
It's your octopus.
It's your octopus. Who cares? The last one, find your trusty toilet paper tube. Dylan isn't sure about this one. Find your trusty toilet paper tube. I colored mine before I cut the legs. I did blue and red because I thought it would be fun. And then if you go back in and give him 8 legs, then he can kind of sit on your nightstand and keep you company.
Looks like a tree trunk or fruits.
He looks like a tree trunk, but there's a face on it, Dylan.
It's hard to see the face, Mom.
He's clearly an octopus.
He's clearly an octopus.
Clearly. All right. That's everything I have. Stay tuned for the book. All right, welcome back. You'll remember the end of chapter 3. They had just gone to the movies. Chapter 4 is a long one, so get comfy. Chapter 4, in the park. It was Sunday afternoon. Arthur had gone to visit a friend, so Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop set out with Stanley for a nearby park. The streets were crowded, and Stanley carried his balloon to lessen the risk of being jostled by people hurrying by. Near the park, they met Ralph Jones, an old college friend of Mr. Lambchop's. "Always a treat running into your family, George," said Mr. Jones. "The older boy was flat once, I recall. You had him rolled up, and once you had a foreign lad with you, a prince, yes?" "What a memory you have," said Mr. Lambchop, recalling the young genie who had been with them at one time. "How are you, Ralph?" said Mrs. Lambchop. "Stanley, say hello to Mr. Jones." "Take care," said Mr. Jones. "That balloon is floating. Just where is Stanley?" Holding the balloon, Stanley said, "I got invisible somehow." "Is that so? First flat, now invisible." Ralph Jones shook his head. "Kids, always one thing or another, eh, George? My oldest needs dental work. Well, I must run. Remember me to that prince. Prince Fawzi Mustafa Aslan Mirza Milak Namir Haraz, as I recall." That must have been a different book. "A truly remarkable memory," said Mrs. Lambchop as Mr. Jones walked away. By a field in the park, the Lambchops found a bench on which to rest. On the field, children were racing bicycles round and round. Suddenly, shouts rose. "Give up, Billy! Billy's no good! Billy, Billy, silly Billy, he can't ride a bike." "That must be Billy," said Mrs. Lambchop. "The little fellow's so far behind the rest. Oh dear, how he teeters." Stanley remembered how nervous he had been when he was learning to ride and how his father had steadied him. Poor Billy. If only... I'll do it, he thought, and tied his balloon to the bench. When Billy came round again, Stanley darted onto the field. Taking hold of the teetering bicycle from behind, he began to run. "Uh-oh," said little Billy, surprised to be gaining speed. Stanley ran harder, keeping the bicycle steady. The pedals rose and fell, faster and faster, then faster still. "Yikes," cried Billy. Stanley ran as fast as he could. Soon they passed the boy riding just ahead, then another boy and another. Not until they had passed all the other riders did Stanley, now out of breath, let go. "Whee!" Billy shouted and went round once more by himself. "You win, Billy," shouted the other boys. "How did you get so good? And so suddenly? You sure had us fooled." All right, there they are on the bikes. Stanley got his breath back and returned to Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop on the bench. "Too bad you missed it, Stanley," said Mr. Lambchop, pretending he had not guessed the truth. "That teetery little boy, he rode very well suddenly." "Oh," said Stanley, pretending also. "I wasn't paying attention, I guess." Mr. Lambchop gave him a little poke in the ribs. Half an hour passed, and Mrs. Lambchop worried that they might be sitting too long in the sun. In Stanley's present state, she said, over-tanning would be difficult to detect. Just then a young man and a pretty girl strolled past hand in hand and halted in a grove of trees close by. "That is Philip, the son of my dear friend Mrs. Hodgson," Mrs. Lambchop said, "and the girl must be his sweetheart Lucia. Such a sad story. They are in love, and Philip wants very much to propose marriage, but he is too shy. He tries and tries, Mrs. Hodgson says, but each time his courage fails, and Lucia is too timid to coax the proposal from him." Mr. Lambchop was not the least bit shy. "I'll go introduce myself," he said, and popped the question for him. "No, George," Mrs. Lambchop shook her head. "Lucia must hear the words from Philip's own lips." An idea came to Stanley. "Be right back," he said, and ran to the grove in which the young couple stood. Once beside them, he stood very still. "Nice day, Lucia, don't you think?" Philip was saying. "Though they say it may rain, who knows?" "You are quite right, I'm sure, Philip," the girl replied. "I do value your opinions about the weather." "You are kind, very kind," Philip trembled a bit. "Lucia, I want to ask, would you consent, that is?" He gulped. "What a pretty dress you have on." "Thank you," said Lucia. "I like your necktie. You were saying, Philip?" "Ah," said Philip, "right, yes, for some time now, dear Lucia. My dearest wish, oh my, I want," he bit his lip. "Look, a dark cloud there in the west. It may rain after all." "I hope not." Lucia seemed close to tears. If it rained, well, we might get wet." This is very boring, Stanley thought. The conversation grew even more boring. Again and again, Philip failed to declare his love, chattering instead about the weather, or the look of a tree, or children playing in the park. "I want to ask, dear Lucia," Philip began again for perhaps the 20th time. "If you will, that is, if..." "Yes," said Lucia, also perhaps for the 20th time. "What, Philip? What do you wish to say?" Stanley leaned forward. "Lucia," said Philip, "Marry me," said Stanley, making his voice as much like Philip's as he could. Lucia's eyes opened wide. "I will, Philip," she cried. "Of course I will marry you." Philip looked as if he might faint. "What? Did I? You will?" Poor Philip. He's a nervous wreck. Lucia hugged him and they kissed. "I've proposed at last," cried Philip. "I can hardly believe I spoke the words." "You didn't," Stanley thought. Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop had seen the lovers' embrace. "Well done, Stanley," they said when he returned to their bench, and several more times on their way home. Mrs. Hodgson called that evening to report that Philip and Lucia would soon be wed. "How wonderful," Mrs. Lambchop said. She had glimpsed them in the park just that afternoon. Such a handsome pair, so much in love. Stanley teased her. You said never to sneak up on people or spy on them, but I did today. Are you mad at me? Oh, very angry, said Mrs. Lambchop and kissed the top of his head. All right, friends, see you tomorrow.